Erasing the stigma against mental illness. Do you know anybody with a mental illness? Do you view them differently because they have a mental illness? Mental illness is becoming more prevalent nowadays because it's becoming easier to talk about it than it used to be. But there's still stigma around it, and we need to work together to end the stigma. I have anxiety, depression, OCD, and ADHD, and have been battling them almost my entire life. I notice when I talk about them openly, some people look at me differently. A very large population in this world have mental illnesses and are being discriminated against because of it. This speech is to inform my audience what exactly is stigma around mental illness, how you can help erase it, and how you yourself can change the way you think about mental illnesses. What is stigma around mental illness, and how prevalent are just mental illnesses? To help you further understand what stigma is around mental illness and just how prevalent mental illnesses are, I will first explain what mental illness stigma is. What is mental illness stigma? Stigma is when someone, or even you yourself, views a person in a negative way just because they have a mental health condition. Some people describe stigma as a feeling of shame or judgment from someone else. Stigma can even come from an internal place, confusing feeling bad with being bad, as said by NAMI. You shouldn't view people a different way just because they have a mental illness. You should try to understand it and help them through it. Most of the time they are struggling for help or for someone to just talk about it with, as said by social worker Elin. Concern over being stigmatized may be a leading reason why people do not seek out help for issues of mental health. If that is the case, as it indeed seems to be, then perhaps it's time to ask ourselves why. After all, some mental illness problems are psychological and some are cognitively rooted, but all benefit from treatment. People are unaware of what people go through when other people stigmatize their mental illness. I've had to go to a mental hospital before I was treated correctly for my illness after multiple attempts. I found out why I had schizophrenia, and when I went back to school, there was a lot of people making fun of me and whispering about me. I wish everyone knew more about mental illness, as said by my friend Patrick. With Patrick's example, you can now see that he got diagnosed, and when he went back to school, people were treating him differently. Just how prevalent are mental illnesses? 1 in 5 Americans are affected by mental health conditions. Stigma is toxic to their mental health because it creates an environment of shame, fear, and silence that prevents many people from seeking help and treatment. The perception of mental illness won't change unless we act to change it, as said by NAMI. Also said by NAMI, approximately 1 in 5 adults in the U.S., 43.8 million, or 18.5%, experiences mental illness given in a year. As said by social worker Elin, when I was teaching NAMI, I had parents that this was the first time in their entire life learning about mental illnesses. And they were only there because their child, family member, or friend has a mental illness. To conclude, I hope you got a better understanding of what mental health stigma is and just how prevalent mental illness is in today's society. Now that you know what stigma is and how common mental illness is, here are some ways you can help erase the stigma around mental illness. How you can erase stigma around mental illness. Show compassion for those with mental illness. I offer free hugs to people living outdoors and sit right there and talk with them about their lives. I do this in public and model compassion for others, since so many of our homeless population are also struggling with mental illness. The simple act of showing affection can make their day, but also remind passerbys of something so easily forgotten, the humanity of those who are suffering, as said by Rachel Wagner. Be there for them. There is no denying that when you are supporting someone with a mental illness that it's tough. You might get frustrated or even down on yourself sometimes, but keep going because that person really needs you. Take their mind off the illness. People are more than just their illness, but sometimes they have difficulty seeing that. Depending on the illness, they might withdraw from social activities and might not have much energy going to places. If you know that they don't get out much and don't have many friends, maybe take them on a fun outing where they can find a temporary distraction from all their pain. According to a blog on Psych Central by Tamara Hill, MS, LPC, this is called call reframing. Reframing is a great psychological tool because it takes a negative statement and puts a positive or more accurate spin on things. For example, instead of saying you need to get out more, all you do is isolate, you can say, I read in an article that the best way to treat depression is by getting out sometimes and doing something you enjoy. Why not join me for dinner tonight? Don't harbor self-stigma. I fight stigma by saying that I see a therapist or a psychiatrist. Why can people say they have an appointment with their primary doctor without fear of being judged, but this lack of fear does not apply when it comes to mental health professionals, as said by Isabel Garcia. Self-stigma occurs when people internalize these public attitudes and suffer numerous negative consequences as a result. We have learned that we can erase the stigma around mental illness. We can also learn how to change the way we think about it ourselves. Now we can focus on our attention on how we change the way we think about mental illness and be aware of it and see the person for who they are, not the condition they might have. How to change the way you think about mental illness. Attend NAMI programs, be active in the community, be aware of mental illness, as said by social worker Elin. NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for the millions of Americans affected by mental illness. Be aware of mental illness. Maybe your friend is off one day. Ask them if they are doing okay. They might have a mental illness and they just need someone to talk to, or they're just having a bad day. See the person, not the condition. People experiencing mental health conditions often face rejection, bullying, and discrimination. This can make their journey to recovery longer and more difficult. Always see a person for who they are, no matter their condition. People don't want to be looked at differently because there is something wrong with them. In conclusion, I think we should work together as a society to end the stigma around mental illness. At the root of this dilemma is the way we view mental health in this country. Whether an illness affects your heart, your leg, or your brain, it's still an illness, and there should be no distinction, as said by Michelle Obama.